Okay, this is homework help video for Unit 4, Worksheet 2. We're going to look at D. Okay, so whenever I have a division problem, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, and then check to see if I can do any factoring to save a little bit of time. So I have no adding or subtracting, so that means I can skip the factoring step. So I'm going to just rewrite my first fraction, and then multiply by the reciprocal, so I'm going to turn that from the denominator to the numerator, and then 9b squared over c. So all I'm doing is taking the second term and writing its reciprocal. And then I'm going to multiply straight across. So I have 2 times 16. And then I'm going to look to see how many a's I have. So I have 2 here and 1 more. So that means I have 3 a's being multiplied. I have a b and a d squared. And be sure to put it in alphabetical order, right? And then do the denominator. So 3 times 9 is 27. And I have no a's. I have 1 b here and then 2 here. So I have 1 and 2 more. So I have 3 b's being multiplied. And I have 2 c's, so 2 c's being multiplied, so 2 c's being multiplied. And then if I look, I don't have anything that divides into 32 or 27. The a's don't reduce, and the c's and the d's don't. So the only thing that ends up reducing are my b's. So I can take one of these b's and reduce that one down by 1. So I have 32a to the third d squared in the numerator because the b canceled one of those. And then 27 b cubed dropped to b squared, and then I still have c squared. And then that's my answer. Let's take a look at h. So this is a multiplying problem, and I have adding and subtracting, so that means I need to factor. So if I look at h, I want to group that. So it's a trinomial, so I would list my factors. So x squared is x and 12 is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And I want it to be a positive 12 when I multiply and still be a negative. So that means they both have to be negative for that to work, because a double negative is what gives me a positive when I multiply. And so the pair that work also for -8 are -2 and -6. So then my factors are x and -2 and -6. And then I want to factor the denominator. So I have 2 terms, and it's a subtraction and a square. So this is a difference of 2 squares. So I know it'll be -4 times +4 is -16. And also gives me that 0 middle term because I have no x. So I have 2 terms here, but no squared. So I'm going to look for a GCF, and it looks like I can divide a 4 out of both of those. So 4x divided by 4 is just x, and 16 divided by 4 is also just 4. For this one here, I want to list my factors for that one because I have a trinomial. So x squared is x times x, and then 4 is either 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. And -4 to add, and for +4 to multiply, that means they both have to be negative. And so -1 and -4 is -5, and -2 and -2 also gives me a -4. So I know my factors are x minus 2 and x minus 2. And so now I look to see, is there any numerator that will cancel with any denominator, and that would be because they have exactly the same. So here I have an x minus 2 and an x minus 2 here, so that cancels 1 with 1. I have an x plus 4 and an x plus 4, that cancels 1 with 1. And then as soon as I do that, whatever is left in the numerator, I write as my answer, and we usually want our just single number values first, so I would put the 4 first, and then the x minus 6. And then in the denominator I have an x minus 4 and an x minus 2. And that would be my answer. Okay. Okay, and then let's take a look at m. So for m, I have x squared minus x, so I can take an x out of both of those. So I have two terms, and they have a common factor of x. So when I divide x squared by x, I'm left with x, and negative x divided by x is a negative 1. And then everything else is a trinomial. So I want to list my factors for all of those. And I know one of these has to be negative, right? Because I have a negative 3 when I multiply. So if I multiply to here, that gives me 1, and to here gives me 6. And so only 1 can be negative, and so if 1 is negative here, that gives me negative 1 and positive 6, which is a positive 5. So then I know for my factors, so I have 2x and x, and I know that 2x has to multiply the 3, so 2x has to multiply the 3, and positive, and the x needs to multiply the negative 1. And then trinomial factoring for the denominator as well. Oops. So not a lot of choices here, but I know I need to get a negative 7 when I multiply, so either the 1 or the 7 has to be negative. And so I'm going to multiply the 2 to the 7, because that'll give me positive 14. And then if I multiply the x to the negative 1, that gives me negative 1x. So negative 1 times 7 is negative 7, and 14 minus 1 is positive 13. So my factors are 2x and x, and then 2x has to multiply to the 7, and negative 1 has to multiply to the x. And then finally for this last one, so I know for my factors I don't have a lot of choice. So x squared can only be x and x, and I don't need to be concerned about where the 1 or the 3 go, because I'm just multiplying by 1x for both. And then I want a positive 2, so I want my 3x to be positive and my 1x to be negative. And then as soon as I have everything completely factored, I look to see is there any numerator common with any denominator. So I have an x minus 1 common in the numerator and denominator. I have an x plus 3 common in the numerator and denominator, and a 2x minus 1. So the only thing left across the top is the x, and the only thing left across the bottom is x plus 7. And then that's it for homework help number 2.